I'm going to do some quick introductions first of who we all are. So my name is John Willshire. I'm founder of Smithery, which is rooted around the idea of making things people want rather than making people want things. This is...
I'm Julie Dolman. I'm the managing director at Experian, focused on our consumer services business.
And I'm James Haycock. I run a business called Adaptive Lab. We're a product development innovation studio using design thinking and lean startup techniques to help businesses to prototype very quickly.
And I'm Mark Els, the Herdmeister, and that's enough.
And so this is a presentation. So we've stepped in after speaking to Dan, who said, "So, could you do a thing quickly?" And funnily enough, that's what we'd like to talk today about, is doing things quickly. So this is a presentation that we have literally written in the foyer outside, and then taken pictures of, and then put up on screen for you, because it's very much the sort of like the modus operandi of what we've been doing together for the last year. And so, and I say the last year, and I do mean that it's sort of like it's Julie and I's 1 year anniversary. No flowers.
No,
so this is kind of hello again. This is kind of like this time last year, I was doing I wasn't on this stage, I was on the next door stage, but giving a presentation about making things people want beats making people want things in this very building. And so it was after that Julie came up to me afterwards. Do you want to tell that story?
Sure, love to. So I sat where you guys are sitting last year. This is me. Fantastic picture. And I really had kind of two main things on my mind, and two main things that I really needed some help with. One is that we are a fantastic machine at Experian. We are the consumer services division. We are the only consumer service division within Experian, which, as some of you know, is mainly B2B. And we've had fantastic success over the course of the last 10 years, and we've built an amazing machine. And that machine does really, really great work, and it's got us to this fantastic place. But we need to now get here, and that space in between requires us to do things massively different, and it actually requires us to, God forbid, break the machine, which is really what we focused on in the last year. So the second thing on my mind is really competitors, and that's always something that's on many of our minds. But for me, there's the competitors that I know, and more frighteningly are the ones that I don't know. And this is a picture of the way I always describe some of those competitors that I don't know, which is young guys and girls sitting in their parents' garage, sitting around in their underwear, pulling together bits and pieces of data into something that actually means something to consumers. And those guys actually scare me the most. And what's most frustrating is that we should be those guys. Those guys have absolutely nothing to lose and only our market share to gain. But the fact of the matter is this: we're Experian. We've got the brand, we've got the funding, we've got the people, and we've got the ideas. So that should absolutely be us. But how do we do that? We have some significant metaphors that define our business that make that quite a challenge and put up some significant barriers. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Mark.
Thank you very much. So one of the things most of us do when we come across a new problem is have a look and a listen. And we're no different. So there's looking. When you watch people and how they behave with each other, you learn an awful lot. It's like active listening, but just watching, observing people in the workplace, observing what happens in meetings, observing what happens supposedly in the processes that organisations have to solve problems together. That's one side of it. But then you listen very carefully as well to the stories that people tell each other and themselves about how the world is, how we do things, how things succeed. The stories they're scared of are really telling. You don't want to do that, because that's the kind of thing like the guy who used to work in that office over there but doesn't anymore. He got sent to Nottingham, which clearly is a bad thing, apparently. The stories that people talk about as success, and the things that they don't tell stories about. There's sort of space, the lacuna stories are always really revealing. Why on earth would you not do it? It seems so obvious when you're outside, that's a big deal, and you should be thinking about that. And the reason why this stuff is, I think, really, really important, you won't be surprised if you've ever heard me talk about human behaviour before or read it in my stuff, particularly the book Herd, is that the space between people is the space that shapes our behaviour. Not the space between our ears, primarily. It's the space between each other, the assumptions we share, how we interact with each other, the assumptions we have about each other, the assumptions that we share about what looks good, what looks bad. So space between is really, really important, and you get that only by watching and listening really, really carefully in organisations. I mean, one obvious thing you might want to get is the assumptions, how do we do shit round here? No, we don't do that. And if you've ever walked into a new job and you've done the wrong thing, you'll know very quickly how strongly these held assumptions are. These are some of the most important barriers to becoming the kind of organisation that Julie's been describing. So let me give you a couple of examples, really practical, tangible things that you might recognise. First of these is a micro behaviour that you see in meetings, what I call a wet fish block. Now, it's not a block that's aggressive, it's not a block that hurts the recipient, it's just a block that goes bleh. We've all seen it happen in meetings. People will ask a question, go, have you considered, for example, this is what I call the PDQ, the pointless data query. Have you looked at those numbers, breaking out the 18 to 24s? It's just a challenge in a meeting that doesn't go anywhere. And this is the kind of thing that we started to observe happening in your organisation as we started to look closely and watch people and listen to them. So it's stopping things happening, not deciding. It's delaying things, but never get to the point of going, we're not doing that, but we're doing this. It's just a lot of stuff accumulating. So here's another thing that we noticed, and this is something that took a long time to surface, but became really central. If you think about most games, most of them have a number of different ways in which you can win, but Jenga has only one, which is not to be the guy or the girl who brings the tower down. And this is a metaphor that's very strong in this, and you might recognise this. A lot of tech and data-led organisations have this. We've got this massive thing we built, and I know just about how to get away without screwing it up. A lot of the inhibition seems to be a shared view of it's a Jenga tower. It's not a Lego box that we can plug stuff together in. It's a Lego. It's a Jenga tower, and I don't want to be the guy. I don't want to be the guy who's the guy who pulls that brick out and the whole thing comes down. Got to protect the thing that exists already. So that's one metaphor. And there's another metaphor which we found really, really interesting. You could see this play out in lots and lots of different ways. And Julie, you first used this in front of us. We went, oh, that's interesting. And then we heard other people use it as well. And it's a really compelling thing. Now, I'm sure you've heard stuff like this in corporations you work in or work with. And this is the idea that we're a Formula One racing car. We're a really great machine. We're really finely tuned. We're going 200 miles an hour around the track again and again, going really, really fast. All you've got to do, today's managers of this business, is to change the tyres without slowing down or going to a pit stop. Now, that is great. It sounds really machismo. It sounds really fantastic, and it flatters the status quo of the business. But what it says is your job is impossible. Because you can't, without the use of a TARDIS or some other time transport machine or a magic wand, you can't change the tyres on a car when it's going around the track at 200 miles an hour. You just can't. So any attempt at innovation just gets stymied, right? Just gets stymied because it's already in your head. You thought of innovation as something that's impossible. Inventing the new business, as you were describing, is going to be impossible, given this metaphor. And this led us to a basic conclusion. This is something that plays very strongly to my experience in business, and I hope does to yours as well, which is the ability to have ideas, the ability to innovate, the ability to take ideas and make them happen is directly and very closely connected with the culture, the assumptions that we have, the behaviours, the micro behaviours every day and the large behaviours. It's less about process and engineering a new machine, it's about the people and what goes on in their heads and between them. So ideas and culture. So if you're going to change the organisation's ability to have ideas, you have to change the culture. The only way you can change the culture is getting people to have ideas differently. You can't do one without the other successfully. So that's what happened next.
So, having scoped out the organisation, having seen what was going on, we had to design a way for that to change. How do we sort of change ways in which people start feeling that they're able to have ideas, not thinking that sort of like, oh, the ideas happen over here, or the innovation is a big, long mountain to climb, rather than small, frequent actions that people can take. And so we use a lot of different learning theories to put together various ways in which people can almost break out of this novice and expert relationship. A lot of culture change stuff is about sort of, look, we will tell you, the experts, the way in which it must be done, and therefore you can just do that. Whereas if you just say to people, okay, we're going to try a thing, and we'll try a different thing, and then something else, and then we'll start looking at how you're approaching these tasks, you are stopping this sort of like novice-expert relationship and starting to build confidence in the people themselves that there are ways in which they can work together, which they can adopt from the various different things that you walk them through. So what we did was we designed 5 innovation loops, which we would always try, we'd design every activity across a 3-day period to be at least 2 of these different things. So the first was empathy. The first was like, how do you put the customer at the heart of your thinking and the heart of your decision making, and actually go, it's not about the capabilities of the organisation or the business goals. How do you start with that person in the centre? How do you sort of design exercises in which we brought customers in to say to people, put in front of them paper prototypes, talk to these people about your earliest stage idea at the lowest resolution of detail that you have. Just talk to people and see what reaction you get straight away. The second one was ingenuity, and rather than sort of like convincing people that yes, innovation is a big mighty mountain to climb, it's innovation as assemblage. It's about sort of, oh, what happens if you take that and just tweak it and do that? What happens if you move this and build it on next to this? So it's going back into the Lego metaphor and giving people different ways in which they could build different ideas within the organisation themselves, and quickly, and look at it, and if they decided that wasn't the thing, they could break it apart and build something else again. The third one was community. And it was just like, what other skills do you have? What other skills do people around you have? How can you put these together and go, together we're stronger, but only by working with people that we don't normally work with. And just introducing little hacks for ways in which you would quickly connect to other people within the business. So there was one we called the Law of 3, where you would get, if you're working on something, go and find someone who's done it before, and go and find someone that has done nothing like it. And just spend 10 minutes talking about it. So suddenly you find yourself in a relationship where you're having to explain, but you're also having to learn as the person who's working on a task. And it's just little hacks that sort of introduce different ways in which businesses can be stitched together. The fourth one was visibility. It's so important that other people can see other people doing this. If you're working on stuff, make it as visible, put it on the walls, put it on tables, put it in the centre of offices. Don't hide it away in separate buildings or separate rooms, etc. Make it a feature of the sort of like, this is how we work around here. And then the fifth one was tenacity. And I think this was almost the most important one. It was a sort of like, just because it doesn't work once, doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just means that the way that you did it didn't work. So what have you learned? What can you try and change and make it work? Or what can you learn from that and put it onto something else? The whole enthusiasm is great, but tenacity is a much more useful belief, mindset when you're working in an innovation space. So once we had our 5 loops, we designed them, and this is stuff that has come out of this work really. So like, we've realised what's going on. This idea of flow engines. How do you get people into a way of working where they can achieve phenomenal things in a short period of time? Because we all have that inbuilt presumption of sort of like, time is something we are short of, but we always work at the same rate. And you go, but if you change the ways in which people work, if you give them different things, suddenly you enter that flow state, that state where time doesn't matter. So how can you introduce more ways of working in which people can get things done very quickly indeed? So the way we think about that is, firstly, you have to set out high consequences. So some of this is sourced from Stephen Kotler's book on flow. So you set high consequences where you say, this is just at the furthest fingertip reach of your abilities. People start paying attention. It's like, all right, what have I got to do? It's either more difficult than things that I've done before, or I have less time to do it than I would normally have, or I'm using a different method, an unfamiliar method. It just snaps people into paying attention. And then you drop them into a rich environment of you keep exposing them to new stuff. so stuff that they haven't seen before, to assimilate, to complex stuff, to let them see that sort of like, actually there is not a simple answer here, but it is part of your work to sort of like to devise the right sort of thing that you might do next. And then finally, it's unpredictability. So just thinking about the way that people progress through exercises and then continually chopping and changing the way that they approach them. So this is a session that we run for 3 days off-site. Typically, we get 25 people to come up with 6 new products, which have been presented to their peers and to people from outside the organisations and other experts about 6 times during that 3 days. And it's in the continuous articulation of what their ideas is that suddenly you're making people, if you give people sort of like after 3 hours in the first day, say, give us your final pitch, suddenly they don't understand exactly what it's going to be, they don't get all the bits right, but they have something to work off. Getting to that first version quickly allows people to iterate. And they get into the spirit of being, they called themselves this, Rocketeers. Because we did the first one in Brighton, it was Brighton Rocket evolved out of that. But Rocketeers is this thing sort of like, it's almost a code word in Experian now. It's this idea that sort of like, okay, so we can do things. We're allowed to do things. We understand what it is, how we adopt some of these methods into the business. But that's the key point for us. It's sort of like Rocketeers need to land. It needs to be about doing it in the business, which is where we pass to James.
Thank you. So as you followed, there's been a couple of phases here that we're talking about. So there's the discovery piece that Mark talked about. So going into the business and in the broader market and understanding some of the challenges that exist and really framing some problems. We've got this fantastic activity that John described where we're down in Brighton for 3 days, creating startup teams around these problems, coming up with brilliant ideas. And at the end of that period, we pick a winning team of Rocketeers who then land back in Experian headquarters the following Monday. So exhausted after a few days. They have the chance to recover over the weekend, but Monday morning sharp, we get them back in again. And over the course of just 2 days, we help them to build a prototype and a business case for their new proposition. So there's 5 Rocketeers in each team, and we partner them up with designers and developers and product people and split them into teams. So we have a design stream, a technology stream, and a business stream. And over the course of those 2 days, they create real prototypes, real technical and visual prototypes. They create a pitch deck. So we use the Sequoia Capital, one of the famous venture capitalists in America. We use their sample pitch deck to build the proposition and the way to talk about it. We help them explore who the audience is and what the business model is by using tools like the value proposition canvas and the business model canvas. And over the course of a very intense couple of days, the teams rinse and repeat their story and their prototype, iterating as they go and pitching to the business. So all of this is happening in front of the whole floor. It's in the middle of the headquarters in London. And so people can see this activity going on. Now the amazing thing about this is the ideas become tangible very, very quickly. So if you can imagine, this is Monday morning, the ideas didn't exist even 3 days ago. And by the end of the Tuesday, they're very real. They're very real. And the beauty of them being real is that you can talk about them. You can prod them, you can touch them, you can show them to people, you can critique them, which is a positive thing. So they're there and you can touch them and you can feel them. And you can then quickly understand how they might be able to evolve from there. So we talked a little bit about, John mentioned getting out to meet users. So over the course of these 2 days, we go out onto the street, we go and do guerrilla testing. So we go out to Victoria train station, we go to the bus station, we find real people, real users who people in the business might not get to meet on a day-to-day basis. So we're very quickly going out and validating the user problems that we've been exploring with real people. We also bring them back into the office. We bring them in and we show them the ideas. We're like, here's what we're thinking. What do you think of this? And that's fantastic to get that very quick validation, but also to allow the teams to meet people that they wouldn't usually get a chance to engage with. When you're in your tower, doing your day-to-day, you don't think about your users or you don't experience them, but when you're sat across them from a table or you're running up to them on the street to speak to them, it just makes it very real and very, very different. A very interesting thing about this is the makeup of the teams. So this isn't just designers and developers and product people from Experian. We've got people from operations, we've got people from legal, we've got people from compliance, all over the business. And the fantastic thing about this is that different viewpoints come to bear on the problem. So people suddenly start to understand the different opinion of a particular department or individual, but really importantly, connections are made that might not otherwise exist. So these people are starting to work together in a completely different way. So typically they may be on the same floor, they probably actually might be able to see each other, but otherwise in their day-to-day they're not speaking. And this gets them away from their email and talking to one another in the teams, but also actually they just get out onto the floor. So you can imagine this activity going on in sort of a breakout area. You've got the whole of the business there, and the teams are just running out. So we've got a problem. We're like, okay, who might be able to solve that problem? Or someone in the analytics team. We're like, great, let's go and find them right now and solve that problem in the next 10 minutes. And it gets the business kind of just exploring itself a lot more quickly. And so that's 2 days. The fantastic thing is at the end of it, we've got a really brilliant pitch. 5 minutes that's presented to Julie and the rest of the exec and the broader business. So there's like 40, 60 people will come along to witness this. And there's a super polished pitch. So here's what the problem is, here's how we're solving it, here's a tangible demonstration of what it is using a prototype, here's what the MVP will be. If we were to start taking this to market tomorrow, where would we go? Which would the first audience group be, and where would we go from there? Why Experian? What's the value from it? And so they've done that in just 24 hours. So that's phenomenally valuable, but the other thing that's amazing is that people start to observe those behaviours. People elsewhere in the business see how we're sticking stuff up on the wall, how we're using post-its, how we're using cards to explore ideas, and use stories rather than PowerPoint presentations to communicate. And those behaviours start to catch on and spread through the business. Now, how back to Julie?
So the end result so far has been this. We've run these innovation sessions out of the office 3 times now. So we did one in January, which is our peak season, and for everybody in our office, it's like the forbidden fruit. Nobody touches it, nobody goes on holiday, nobody does anything. But we actually took 25 key people out of the office, and the great news is that we proved to everybody that even in January, we can make time for this. We still managed to make our number and nobody died, which is most important. Over the course of those 3 sessions, we've now had 80 people within various parts of my organization, 80 groups of cross-functional teams who have now been through this experience. And we now have 16 new product ideas. 16 new product ideas that are in a really interesting place right now. So we've had a Founders Festival where we brought back out all 16 of those ideas and made them better. So we kind of had this festival where everybody walked around to each of the tables and worked on how they could spend about an hour making that idea better and then repitched. The really, really amazing thing is that this change is happening. It's not just about the products that we build. Yes, we want new products to come out of this, and that's fantastic. But more important to me is the culture and the change in culture and the belief that we can do, act, and think differently. And that's exactly what we need to do to get back to that space that I was talking to you about earlier. 80% of the people that have been in this experience have said that there's an absolute change in them and in the way that they behave based on this experience. Most important, innovation, or the idea of innovation, is very overwhelming. It's something that none of us have time to do, we're all a little bit scared of, and what this has done is it's actually given us the confidence to understand that it's not that hard. We innovate all day, every day. Innovation is simply about taking something that already exists and just working to make it better. And this has really helped us build confidence and appreciate the fact that we can do this and we are doing it. The change is happening and it's really, really exciting.
So we'd just like to finish up by saying it's been a phenomenal experience for all 4 of us and all the people that have worked on this at Experian for the last year, and we're now beginning to open this up because it's sort of like we've had so much fun, we want other people to discover that this is month 1 of the rest of your business. That feeling that we had at the end of January last year. After setting this up, we're beginning to talk to other people about it. So if you come and grab us after the session, ask questions now. But yeah, I hope you find some interesting and useful stuff in.